It was a day like any other. Earth's sky was clear, the sun shining, and humanity went about its business. But then something happened that would change the course of history forever. A massive ship appeared in the sky. It wasn't just large, it was enormous, the size of a city. It came without warning, and its sleek, metallic surface shimmered in the sunlight. People froze in place, looking up at the craft. The air felt heavy, charged with the unknown. And then, a voice boomed from the sky, broadcast across every television, every device on Earth. "We are the Sreki, and we come in peace." The world held its breath. Peace. The word echoed through the minds of millions. Humanity had long dreamed of first contact, of meeting intelligent life beyond Earth. But this felt different. The Sreki made their intentions clear. They offered gifts, advanced technology, knowledge, resources beyond anything Earth had ever known. They spoke of cooperation, of a united future. They said they came to help humanity thrive. But their help came with a price. "The galaxy is vast, but there is a place for you," the alien voice continued. "Join us, and you will prosper. Refuse, and you will perish." At first, people were hesitant, but many saw the benefits, the promises of a world without poverty, hunger, or war. This Sreki's technology could solve problems humanity had struggled with for centuries. Still, there was something unsettling about it, something in the way they spoke, in their perfect tone, in their demands. The gifts seemed too good to be true, and humans, for the first time, began to question. Then came the first sign of resistance. A group of scientists, led by a brilliant but obscure strategist, found something strange in the alien technology. Hidden beneath the sleek exterior, they discovered a flaw, one that the Sreki had not anticipated. It was subtle, but significant. The tech wasn't just a gift, it was a means to control. But the discovery was just the beginning. Soon, other nations joined in, sensing the growing unease. Some embraced the Sreki's offer without question, while others grew suspicious. But one thing became clear: humanity wasn't going to submit without a fight. Humanity was not going to be enslaved. The Sreki had underestimated the human spirit, their will to survive, to resist. The first shots of a new war had been fired, and the future of Earth now lay in the hands of those who would not bow to invaders. Humanity was in turmoil. The Sreki, with their superior technology, had made their offer clear, and many nations had been quick to accept. But there was a growing resistance, fueled by fear, distrust, and the desire to protect humanity's freedom. In secret, a coalition of world leaders and military commanders came together. The Sreki had thought they could divide humanity, that they could conquer Earth without resistance. But they had underestimated something fundamental: human nature. The humans of Earth didn't want peace on the terms the Sreki were offering. They wanted to keep their independence, their identity, and they were willing to fight for it. A new kind of leader emerged, warlords, not of old Earth, but born out of necessity. Men and women with sharp minds, capable of thinking beyond the limits of what the Sreki expected. These new leaders didn't just have military knowledge, they had creativity. They adapted fast, using the alien technology to reverse engineer weapons, shields, and defense systems. But they didn't stop there. They developed entirely new strategies the Sreki couldn't predict. The first major victory came when a human fleet, under the command of one of these new warlords, outsmarted the Sreki in a surprise attack. The humans had been able to reverse engineer the cloaking technology the aliens used, and in a battle above the atmosphere, they ambushed the invaders with their own invisible ships. The Sreki were stunned. They hadn't expected the humans to learn so quickly, to adapt so fully. What they didn't understand was that humans were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something more. They were fighting for their home, their world. On Earth, the leaders of this new resistance were called warlords. They were not tyrants, but champions of the people, uniting humanity under a single banner. They became the faces of the revolution, the symbol of human defiance. Their names echoed across the globe. Some were former military officers. Others were brilliant strategists, scientists, and engineers. But despite the successes, the war was far from over. The Iraqi were relentless. They sent wave after wave of reinforcements to Earth, each one more advanced than the last. But every time the humans adapted, every time they found a weakness, they struck back harder. Among the warlords, one figure began to rise above the rest. A young tactician who had once been a low-ranking officer, now the leader of Earth's most powerful fleet. Her strategies were ruthless, her mind sharp. She was a symbol of human ingenuity, the embodiment of everything this Iraqi had underestimated. She had a vision for humanity's future, one where Earth would never bow to any alien force again. Under her leadership, humans began to push this Iraqi back, slowly but surely, reclaiming lost territory and gaining ground in their fight for freedom. As the warlords coordinated the human resistance, a sense of unity began to form. Earth's nations, once divided, now stood together against a common enemy. The Iraqi had thought they were dealing with a fractured, vulnerable species. They were wrong. Humanity was growing stronger, and the Iraqi were starting to realize that this fight wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. The Iraqi were not used to losing. After the humans' surprising victories, the galaxy's most feared empire rallied itself. The Iraqi had underestimated Earth's ability to adapt, to fight back. Now, they were preparing for a full-scale counterattack. Their fleets, once thought to be invincible, began to descend on Earth's outer defenses in waves. The Iraqi were relentless. They came with an arsenal of new, more advanced weapons. Drones that moved at lightning speed, ships that cloaked themselves in the black void of space, and soldiers who were enhanced with cybernetic implants. They had every advantage of technology, and they intended to crush humanity's resistance once and for all. But the humans weren't ready to back down. They knew what was coming. As this Iraqi fleet approached, the warlords gathered their forces. Earth's defenses had improved since the last battle. The human fleets had been upgraded with Iraqi technology, but it was not just the tech that made them strong. It was the tactics, the cunning. The human mind had become a weapon in itself. The first major battle of this counterattack was fought in Earth's orbit, with the Iraqi using their cloaking devices to launch a surprise strike. But humanity had anticipated this move. Using their own cloaked ships and predictive AI, they managed to counter the attack, ambushing the Iraqi fleet in a devastating strike that crippled their lead vessels. Despite the losses, the Iraqi came back harder. They had learned from their failure. The next wave was even more brutal. The Iraqi unleashed their full arsenal. Massive warships, automated drones, and even mind-controlled soldiers, all designed to overwhelm humanity's defenses. They bombarded Earth's cities, leaving craters where once thriving metropolises stood. But in the chaos, something unexpected happened. Humanity didn't break. Instead, they fought harder. Every major battle was a test of human will. Warlords led counterattacks, fighting not just with superior weapons, but with innovation and resilience. They used the alien technology against them, creating new tactics that Iraqi couldn't predict. One key moment came when a small human fleet, heavily outnumbered, lured a massive Iraqi warship into a trap. They deployed a fleet of drones, making it appear as if they were retreating. This Iraqi, thinking they had won, pursued them into an asteroid field. There, hidden within the rocks, the humans set off an explosive ambush, destroying the flagship in a blaze of fire and metal. The victory was hard-won, but it sent a message to this Iraqi. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Their enemy's technology may have been superior, but their spirit was unbreakable. As the battle raged on, the warlords began to realize something even more troubling. The Iraqi weren't just fighting for control of Earth. They were fighting for something deeper, something older. This Iraqi were determined to wipe humanity out, not just to conquer the planet, but because they saw something in humanity that terrified them: potential. The warlords, once fighting for survival, now realized they were facing an existential battle. The fate of Earth was no longer just about freedom. It was about proving that humanity could survive against the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. As the Iraqi regrouped for their next move, the humans prepared for the next stage of the war. The aliens had no idea what was coming. Humanity wasn't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting to become the deadliest warlords in the galaxy. The war had changed. What began as a fight for survival had evolved into something far darker. Humanity, once desperate to defend their home, was now fighting with an intensity and ruthlessness that stunned the galaxy. This Iraqi, for all their technological superiority, could no longer predict the humans' moves. The warlords had pushed the limits of military strategy to their breaking point, employing tactics that were as deadly as they were unexpected. The line between victory and annihilation had blurred. Every battle became a test of endurance, cunning, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. Orbital bombardments became the norm. Entire cities were wiped from the face of the Earth in the blink of an eye, not by the Iraqi, but by humanity itself. The warlords had learned to wield their most powerful weapon, the power to strike with no mercy. But the question haunted them all: was this still the path of righteousness? The human tactics were brutal, targeting not just military installations, but key Iraqi command centers, cutting off their supply lines and striking at the heart of their empire. They used psychological warfare, making every Iraqi soldier question their ability to win. They launched campaigns of terror, using their own weapons of mass destruction against the alien invaders, leaving entire Iraqi fleets in ruins. There was no mercy. In the eyes of the warlords, the only way to ensure humanity's survival was to show the galaxy that Earth could not be conquered. The Iraqi had tried to wipe them out, but now humanity had become the very thing they feared: the deadliest force in the galaxy. The protagonist, once a young strategist now risen to command a fleet, stood at the center of this transformation. She had become a symbol of humanity's resolve, her reputation for ruthless efficiency spreading across the stars. Yet even she began to question the cost of their victories. With every passing day, she saw her people become more like their enemies: warriors without remorse, warriors without a future. The warlords knew that they were pushing the galaxy to the edge, but they also knew that any hesitation now could cost them everything. The Iraqi were relentless. They fought back with all their might, but the human warlords had grown too powerful, too quick to adapt, and too determined to win. One of the most pivotal battles came when a Iraqi flagship, the largest vessel in their fleet, was set to launch a final assault on Earth. The humans intercepted it in deep space, luring the flagship into a trap. Using all their resources, they deployed a new weapon: an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disable the Iraqi's cloaking technology, making their fleet visible for the first time in months. The flagship, once thought invincible, was destroyed in an instant. The victory was devastating, but it came at a cost. The warlords had pushed their own fleets to the brink, using up resources, sacrificing countless lives. The humans had won, but there was nothing left to celebrate. The protagonist, leading from the front, stared at the ruins of the once proud Iraqi flagship, and a cold realization washed over her. In their pursuit of victory, humanity had crossed a line they could never return from. This Iraqi had made the same mistake, underestimating humanity. But now, the warlords were beginning to wonder if they had become the very thing they once fought against. Their victories had made them feared across the galaxy. But in the silence of space, after the destruction, there was no victory dance, no celebrations, just the cold weight of what had been done. Humanity had become the deadliest force the galaxy had ever seen. But at what cost? The war had reached its tipping point. For years, humanity had fought with everything they had: blood, sweat, and countless sacrifices. Now, the Seraki's empire was crumbling. Their once mighty fleets had been reduced to fragments, scattered across the galaxy. The warlords had led humanity to victory after victory, but the final battle was about to begin. The Sereki, backed into a corner, had no choice but to make their last stand. They had one final weapon left. An ancient, nearly forgotten weapon they had kept hidden for millennia. It was their last hope, a weapon that could wipe out entire planets, annihilating everything in its path. If the humans couldn't stop it, Earth would be erased from the stars. Humanity's warlords, however, had one last card to play. They'd learned of the Sereki's secret weapon, and they knew they couldn't let it reach Earth. The only way to end the war once and for all was to strike at the heart of the Sereki Empire, their homeworld, the source of their power. Under the command of the protagonist, humanity launched its most daring and dangerous mission yet. The final assault would be led by a coalition of human fleets, pushing through the heart of Sereki-controlled space. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of the galaxy. The warlords knew the stakes. The Sereki had built their empire on the backs of conquered worlds, and now they were desperate to defend it. The final battle would take place on the Sereki homeworld, an industrial planet surrounded by a vast defensive fleet. But it wasn't just about defeating the Sereki. It was about ending their reign of terror once and for all. As the human fleet approached, the tension was unbearable. The protagonist stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring out at the dark expanse of space. The Sereki fleet loomed ahead, ready for the final confrontation. But there was more at stake here than just a military victory. This was a battle for everything humanity had fought for: their freedom, their survival, and their future. The battle was brutal. The Sereki threw everything they had left at the humans. Their ships, their soldiers, their weaponry. It was all deployed in a desperate attempt to hold the line. But the humans were ready. With every attack, they countered, using their own modified weapons and tactics to break through the Sereki defenses. The space around the Sereki homeworld was filled with explosions, flashes of light, and the wreckage of warships. But in the heart of the battle, the protagonist made a startling discovery. She'd uncovered something in the Sereki's technology, something that shattered everything she thought she knew about the aliens. The Sereki weren't just conquerors, they were survivors. Their empire had been built on the remains of ancient, almost extinct civilizations, and their true goal wasn't conquest. It was to survive. The Sereki had developed the weapon not to destroy the galaxy, but to protect their species from extinction. It was their last-ditch effort to secure a future for their people, using the most extreme measures to ensure their survival. The realization hit the protagonist hard. The war had always been about survival, but now she understood. Both species were fighting for the same thing. In that moment, a decision had to be made. The protagonist could order the destruction of the Sereki homeworld, ending their empire forever. But at what cost? Would humanity become no different than the invaders they had fought so hard to repel? The warlords knew that victory could mean their humanity's moral collapse. As the battle raged, the protagonist made a final choice. With a single command, she ordered her fleet to disable the Sereki weapon, to render it inert. The humans would win, but they wouldn't destroy the Sereki. Instead, they would offer a choice: surrender or coexist. The Sereki, broken and defeated, were forced to accept the terms. The warlords had won, but humanity had done so with honor, preserving their soul in the face of overwhelming odds. The Sereki would leave Earth, never to return, and the warlords would ensure that humanity would never forget what it had become. As the Sereki fleet withdrew into the darkness of space, the protagonist stood once again on the bridge of her ship. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's future was far from done. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's rise to power, and they would never forget the humans, the deadliest warlords the universe had ever seen. The war was over. The Sereki had withdrawn from Earth, leaving behind only shattered remnants of their once mighty empire. The human fleets stood victorious. though the cost of their triumph was etched into every scar of the battlefield. Earth had survived, but so much had been lost. Cities had been leveled, and the scars of war ran deep. In the wake of the final battle, the warlords gathered in the heart of Earth's newly established capital, a place that had once been a symbol of human resilience. Now, it was a place where humanity would rebuild, but also reflect. The cost of the war was still too fresh in their minds. The blood spilled, the lives lost. Nothing could erase the reality of what had been sacrificed. The protagonist, once a simple strategist who had risen to lead humanity in their darkest hour, now stood at the forefront of a new era. Her decision to disable the Seraki's final weapon, to offer them the chance to coexist rather than obliterate them, had forever changed the course of history. It wasn't a decision without controversy, but it was one that had ensured humanity would not descend into the darkness they had fought to avoid. The galaxy, once terrified of the Sereki, now turned its gaze to Earth. The humans, once seen as weak and fractured, had proven themselves to be the galaxy's deadliest warlords. Yet they had shown mercy when the moment came to destroy. That act of restraint had earned them respect, even from their former enemies. But the universe was not the same as it had been before the war. It was now a place of uneasy peace, with the warlords assuming roles they had never expected. The protagonist, who had once led her people in the heat of battle, now stood as Earth's ambassador to the galaxy. Her role was to forge new alliances, to heal the wounds of the past, and to ensure that humanity would never be forced to fight again unless it was absolutely necessary. Yet, the peace was fragile. The Sereki had retreated to the outskirts of the galaxy, but they were not gone. And other alien species, who had watched the war unfold, began to take notice. Some were wary of humanity, seeing them as potential rivals, while others saw them as potential allies. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and humanity had secured its place at the table. The warlords, once isolated and focused solely on victory, now became the bridge between Earth and the greater galactic community. They helped to negotiate treaties, set up trade agreements, and ensure that humanity's newfound strength was used not as a weapon of conquest, but as a force for peace and cooperation. It was a delicate balance, and there were those who would challenge humanity's place in this new order. But the protagonist knew that humanity's greatest strength was not just their ability to fight. It was their ability to adapt, to learn from their past, and to push forward despite the odds. Earth's warlords had proven that. The galaxy had witnessed their rise, and now humanity was ready to prove that they could be more than just conquerors. The final scene of the warlord saga came on the eve of a grand galactic summit. Leaders from various species arrived to discuss the future of the galaxy, and humanity stood among them, not as invaders, but as equals. The protagonist stood at the front of the summit hall, looking out over the delegates. The weight of the past, the ghosts of battle, and the sacrifices made still lingered in her heart. But as the leader of this new age, she stood with pride. A new dawn had come for humanity, not just as survivors, but as the leaders of a new era. The galaxy would never forget the warlords who had risen from the ashes of war. Humanity had earned their place among the stars, and their future was no longer one of mere survival. It was one of influence, responsibility, and hope. As the summit began, the protagonist made her way to the podium. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, humanity stood ready to shape that future. They were no longer just the galaxy's deadliest warlords. They were the guardians of peace, the creators of a new world where strength would no longer be defined by domination, but by the willingness to protect and build. The warlords had won, and humanity, though scared and battered, had emerged stronger than ever.